This is a Muscle Cat Media production.
Back with you on the Expats, wrapping up the Wild Card series and looking ahead to the Division Series in Major League Baseball. No guest on the podcast this weekend. We thought Eric may be back for a second consecutive episode, but as it is, he's on the road traveling and decided that he only had time enough for one episode. So Rolsey and Spoon with you to break down the Wild Card series and look ahead to both the American League and National League Division Series. Spoon, how are you?
I'm good. I'm missing Eric, but it might be a blessing in disguise because I don't think he would have helped touching on the Jays series for a little too long. Like this way, we can allocate about 25% of showtime to all four series, right? Where there's a good chance Eric would have taken a bigger slice of the pie for Jays Yankees. So this will be an even distribution, which will be great for the neutral listener.
Yeah, there would have been a large skew toward one particular team of the eight teams left.
Man. Like if the D-backs snuck on in, like I was hijacking the shit out of this show. So
yeah, I mean, I'm not mad at you. It was a big weekend of sport last weekend in Australia. It's a big weekend of sport this weekend. Obviously, we had the Wild Card series, which we'll touch on, but the Division Series starting on Sunday our time is a little bit of a bummer, but in some ways it's also a blessing in disguise. A massive race day in Sydney and Melbourne tomorrow, the NRL Grand Final on Sunday. Monday being a public holiday in New South Wales and Queensland makes it amazing to be able to sit around and watch baseball.
Adelaide too.
And in South Australia, right. I sometimes just forget that South Australia is a state. And you are chasing a filly up toward New South Wales, heading to Randwick tomorrow. That's an actual horse, ladies and gentlemen, not just another young lady that our Reese Columbus is trying to court.
Well, let's not limit my options. I mean, the racing finishes at 5 p.m. I've got a whole evening ahead of me at that point, especially if Shiki does salute, which the market suggests she's a decent chance to do so. I mean, I don't think you could have touched the 280 all in midweek for 15 unraced horses, but now that she's drawn a gate and she's out to 330, look, this isn't a horse tipping show, but if she gets out to fours, I think she's a very good bet at that price.
Yeah, the market move on that was quite interesting. For those of you wondering, it is Shiki in the Jim Crack. She was the favorite at the moment. It's the fillies' 2-year-old race at Randwick on Saturday. But yeah, we digress. We could go on and on about that for an hour, and this is not a racing show. So look, as we sort of review some of these wild card series, and we'll do it as we look ahead to the National League Division Series. I just want to get off my chest. Anyone who listens to this show knows that I am not a fan of the regular season schedule. I have made it known throughout the regular season. I especially made it known sort of toward the end of the season, and the fact that I didn't like that there was no longer a game 163. So I think that there's something Major League Baseball certainly can look to improve regular season-wise and toward the end of the regular season. But I've got to say, this wild card thing has been a revelation because getting 4 games on 3 consecutive days, if they go to deciders, we were lucky enough to where we got 2 days of 4 straight games and then 3 deciders today, Friday Australia time, Thursday in the United States. The back-to-back-to-back-to-back nature of it is unlike really anything that we've ever seen, I think, in baseball, and sort of immediately feeling like you're thrust into a game 5 of a tied 7-game series with the atmosphere and everything that goes along with it. I think the wild card series has been an incredible way to start the postseason. I mean, we've learned that the team that wins game 1, the majority of the time, goes on to win that series. I mean, I think Boston not winning the series against the Yankees became the first team of 16 wild card series to not go on and win that series and go to the division series. So you know how important that first game is, and you really feel that atmosphere. And because of that, most of the game 1s were the best games that we saw in this wild card series across the board. But I've just got to say that this format I'm in love with. And nobody has been an opponent of Major League Baseball scheduling the last few years than I have, but I've got to give them their flowers on what they've done with the postseason because these wild card series are incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And look, I'm a fan of NBA basketball, and I've got to be honest that my fandom kind of declines every year. And one of the knocks I have, and I do have a few knocks, is we don't need 4 best of 7s in a row. Like 28 potential playoff games is just an insane schedule to figure out a champion. Look, we play 162 games in baseball, but we still play 82 games in NBA. You can't tell me that the 8th team needs 7 games against the potential top seed, especially once they went to the play-in. Like, why are we not doing a best of 3, first versus 8th, where the team's already gone through the play-in, and all 3 games can be at the home team of the higher seed, which is the advantage, like it is in baseball. But the idea that we need to watch OKC just beat up on a team 4 times is crazy. I would like to see NBA shift to, even if it was a 5-5, 7-7. Obviously baseball's got like a 3-5, 7-7 now. But I think just the importance of these games. Like, I love the World Series, I love the Championship Series. But I think a best of 3, like you said, where there's 3 games in a row, there's no tomorrow for teams very quickly. You're 1-0 down, you're facing elimination. Seeing some of the way that bullpens are managed today. I mean, Aroldis Chapman came in the 8th inning down 4 runs. Like, where are you going to see anything like that in any other sport, where a guy whose job is like one specific role and it just completely goes out the window because that's what we have to do? I think they absolutely nailed it. I know that some powerhouse teams, like fans of the Dodgers, don't like it because they want to just be able to cakewalk a division every year and not have as many teams sort of be in with a hunt. And there was a belief, I guess, that the expanded playoffs would lead to a really lopsided buy-or-sell market at the deadline. But this year probably proved that that's not the case, because a couple of teams that sold ended up making it anyway. So I think from a competition balance point of view, but also from an entertainment point of view, this would have to be right up there with the best year that Major League Baseball's had in a long time.
And it's hard to argue that we don't have the best 8 teams left. You still have every division winner. So 2 of the division series will feature division winners going against each other, Dodgers versus Phillies, Detroit versus Seattle. And then the other 2 division series are 2 interdivisional teams that'll be facing each other. So it's hard to argue that, yes, sometimes if you force excitement early, you can end up with a little bit of chaos that creates the wrong result. But it's kind of hard to argue that we haven't ended up with the best 8 teams or roundabout the best 8 teams after the wild card series.
Maybe the only sort of team that was even missing from the wildcard series to begin with was probably Texas, right? Like, they had a plus 79 run differential, and Cleveland had a -6 run differential. So, like, even if you tweak that, and again, at the end of the day, the Guardians earned their spot by flying home. Even when you expand it, you still can say all these teams should be there, and they've all contributed in a positive way.
Yeah. And look, I'm with you on the 3-game thing as well. We didn't need to see 2 more games of Dodgers-Reds. We just didn't need to see it. There's no reason to flog that dead horse any more than what we already did. I mean, the Dodgers won comprehensively in consecutive games and got the 3rd day off. The other thing I think that makes it outstanding is there's 3 games in a row, 3 consecutive days, no moving venues. I like that as well, because it just means you're going to get 3 straight days of baseball, and there's a massive advantage to not finishing as the bottom 2 wildcard teams, essentially. Mm-hmm. So I think what they've done with it, I know Major League Baseball has tweaked with its playoff format, off and on the last 15 years. It's obviously tweaking with the regular season format, but as an opponent of what they've done in the regular season, I just wanted to say that I'm very happy with what they've done in terms of the wild card. So, look, we mentioned Yankees Red Sox. Obviously, the Yankees winning that game today. They will go on to face the Blue Jays in the American League Division Series. It's just so funny how postseason baseball tends to throw the unlikeliest of heroes. Like, I don't know that anybody thought that Cam Schlittler was going to be on the mound with the Yankees' season hopes on the line. Not only did they not think that he was not going to be on the mound in that spot, but he threw a game that we really haven't seen ever in Major League Baseball postseason. No runs allowed, 12 strikeouts, no walks. By doing that today in that clinching game at home against Boston, he became the first pitcher ever in the postseason to do that. Prior to today, no one had thrown 8 innings without a walk and struck out 12 or more in a postseason game. Cam Schlittler is the person that's done that. And funnily enough, he becomes only the 4th Yankee who's ever struck out 12 or more in a postseason game. And this is why these series are so great. We're 3 days in to the Major League Baseball playoffs, and Cam Schlittler is now a household name.
Yeah, I think they said he didn't get to a 3-ball count after the 2nd inning as well, which is
absurd.
Just insane control. It's funny how much of a sliding doors moment a baseball season can be, because his name was thrown around a lot as a potential trade piece with the Arizona Diamondbacks for Geno Suarez. And then instead they went, you know what, we don't need any more offense. We want like a gold glove kind of guy at third base instead. They went and got Ryan McMahon, cost a lot less to do so, and they end up holding on to the guy who wins them the wild card series. So these little calls and these little moments and whispers and all that kind of thing that, you know, there's another world out there where that move gets made. And it's a different story for both teams involved.
Care to take a guess at who the other three in Yankees postseason history that have struck out 12 or more?
Cole ever do it?
He did, yep, 2020. He's one of them.
Okay. Yep.
The other two were in the same postseason.
Recently or historic?
No, 25 years ago. The year was 2000. Both did it in the year 2000.
Yeah, I'll struggle.
Clemens struck out 15 in a playoff game in 2015, and El Duque was the other one. Orlando Hernandez struck out exactly 12 in a postseason game in 2000 as well. That's pretty good company to be in. Roger Clemens, Orlando Hernandez, Garrett Cole, and Cam Schlittler. Now the only four Yankees that have struck out 12 or more in a postseason game. Look, what it does now, setting up this series against Toronto for New York is, I mean, tongue in cheek, but New York didn't have to use their bullpen much today. I mean, he goes 8 innings. They get the one off day, have to travel to Toronto. It's not a far travel for them. And a Yankees team has been much maligned pitching-wise, really the last 3 quarters of the season. I mean, probably they were okay until those injuries started to hit him sort of in late May and early June. This is nothing new for Aaron Boone, right? Like he's had to patchwork pitching really this entire season, but getting the ability to win a deciding game, getting a day off, essentially 2 full rest days for the bullpen, I think could be a huge storyline and a huge advantage for New York going into the division series.
Especially, I think it was Bednar who had to pitch a couple of days in a row, right? And he's just been like the guy. Like they didn't. The Devin Williams things kind of had mixed success. I think Camilo Doval is another one that, like, okay, can we trust him? Not sure. But Bednar's just been as good as he was in Pittsburgh ever since he went to New York, and they had to use him yesterday, had to use him today. That off day is going to be huge, like you said, and obviously they're using him in high leverage situations. It'll be interesting what sort of starters we see named from these teams. Like, I don't know if we're able to flip back around to the start of the rotation. Like, what is it? Game 1 was Tuesday of the wildcard series here, or was it?
It would be Wednesday. 4 days rest, so you could do it. And I mean, like you said, with seeing Aroldis Chapman coming down 4 in a postseason game, the postseason is the time when you might see a pitcher come back on 4 days.
Maybe someone who had a shorter start potentially. Like, I don't think the Tigers can go and put Skubal out there after he went 7.2 and 100 and something pitches. Like, that's probably not where you're looking. Potentially. I mean, the others have kind of named, like Cubs haven't named a starter yet. Could the Cubs be sort of a team that did that? Who'd they have in game 1? It wasn't Schroeder. It was Boyd, wasn't it? And he was quiet. I reckon he only threw, because we talked about his unders. Let me get it up real quick. He threw 58 pitches. Like, can they just go Matt Boyd again game 1? I would have thought so. 4.1 innings. Pretty low leverage kind of stuff in the end. And I think he gave up 1 hit and got the hook. The lack of starting pitching for the Cubs makes me think that that's where they're going to have to go, particularly because they exhausted that bullpen in the Padres series. I think they had to use 5 or 6 guys today and maybe the same yesterday. And it's not a particularly deep sort of bullpen with talent. So maybe we see that with Boyd. I'm not sure if we're going to see it anywhere else. I don't think the Yankees would go back to Fried this quickly. He threw 95 pitches or something like that. I think it was. I
think he threw over 100. Yeah, 102 pitches for Fried in his start. So there's no chance that we'll see him. I find it odd that Toronto is yet to name a starting pitcher. Some of that could be some gamesmanship, but I guess some of that could also be waiting to see who they were going to face to determine whether or not
it's got to be
who. Yeah, I mean, who I guess they were going to trot out.
Yeah.
One thing, if you are Aaron Boone, that I think probably he has learned in the postseason, I mean, many people probably would have seen the quote and the words from Jazz Chisholm after game 1, thinking, why was I not in the lineup? He wasn't in the lineup for platoon reasons, obviously. And it was funny because they asked him sort of how he dealt with that. He said he went back home, played MLB The Show, and mercy ruled some 11-year-old kid after game 1, which it was just like Jazz Chisholm is all of us. Enters the lineup in game 2, has the walk and scores the run on the double down the line, gets a couple of base hits, saves a couple of runs with his glove. I think that's maybe the one takeaway in a Yankees lineup that has been so platoon heavy because they have a lot of righties that do hit lefties well. their bench is a little bit different than what it's looked like the entire year. I mean, the way that their offense has been a patchwork is similar to what their pitching staff has been. But I don't think Aaron Boone can afford lefty or righty to remove Jazz Chisholm from the lineup. Just the electricity that he has sort of injected in that team the last 2 games of that series.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that the Red Sox kind of stole game 1 by effectively going Crochet right into Chapman and leaving, Jazz Chisholm, Ben Rice, a couple of those other lefties on the bench, and really going after some guys that probably wouldn't be there if it was a right-handed starter. Yeah, I mean, what have the Jays got as far as sort of left-handing pitching? I'll bring it up now. I think where's their starting rotation? They've got Eric Lauer, who was their only lefty, and they moved him to the bullpen. So Gossman, Bassett, Barrios, Scherzer, Bieber, they're all right-handers. So that, if you look at how Boston got their win, but then you look at how it's going to shape up a little differently in Toronto. Yeah, I don't know. This series screams 5 games to me. I don't know if you're ready to sort of jump into what we're expecting from it, but yeah, this screams 5 games to me because I think the way the Yankees did it, coming from 1 game down, which no one's really done, not just this year, but in the history of this sort of format in the last 4 or 5 years, to do it in that fashion, to have it not be Aaron Judge carrying and for it not to be Stanton carrying, for it to be Austin Wells driving in Jazz Chisholm, yesterday. I think when we talk about like a complete team and how important that is in the playoffs and for it to be someone else because, historically with this Yankees team, it's always Stanton, it's never Judge. This being somewhere in between is quite like an exciting thing, I think, if you are a Yankees fan. And just getting Ben Rice in the lineup, Jazz Chisholm in the lineup against right-handed pitching 5 days in a row. I mean, even in the bullpen, I don't think they've got a heap of lefties at all. So it's going to be really interesting to see what that looks like and what that does to the Yankees sort of run scoring potential, especially because these are lineups that have seen these guys a handful of times because they share in the same division, right? Like, and that's an advantage that Yankees and Boston had against each other. And obviously both teams get that advantage. But I think for the Yankees, just given what they did in these last 3 days, also a lot of teams don't like having this much time off from baseball, right? Like the Dodgers complained about the format, largely probably out of excuse making for not winning as many World Series over the last few years as they probably could have. But before last year, the Dodgers complained about the format when Arizona swept them 3-0 and Lance Lynn gave up 4 home runs in a row and was one of the best days of my life, but that's irrelevant to the point I'm making. Because taking 4 or 5 days off while your other team, the team that gets you, had to play good baseball to get there and they come in with a bit of momentum, it's going to be interesting. I feel like in some ways, the way the Jays are as a momentum-heavy team, they might have been in a better position going through the gauntlet of the wild card. It's a shame we don't have Eric for his thoughts on that. But yeah, that's kind of where I am on it. And I can see a world where the Yankees do win this in 5.
Interestingly enough, this is the only of the division series games that if it did go 5, they would play on 5 consecutive days. There's an off day in the middle of every other series other than this one, interestingly enough. Again, the proximity between New York and Toronto allows that to happen. But just the way that the schedule has sort of come to fruition, if it does go 5 games, it would be 5 games in 5 days. Obviously, the first 2 in Toronto, next 2 in New York, and then if they played a game 5, it would be back in Toronto. Toronto did win the season series 8-5, but you're right. The momentum is definitely on the side of the Yankees. They came home winning 9 of their last 10. That's what, now 11 of their last 12, whereas Toronto were 5-5 and just kind of fell in terms of the division. So you see a world in which the Yankees could win it, but hand on heart, who's your pick to go ahead to the American League Championship Series from this matchup?
I'm going to go Yankees as something a little bit different. For the series, I think they're $2.05 to where is it? It's not as much as you would think. What I do really like, and this isn't a pick that I'm necessarily going to make, but over 4.5 games at $2.60 is really exciting because I could see them stealing 1 each on the road. Like in that first 2 games, I think Yankees will take 1 of the 2 in Toronto, and then the Jays will do the same back, and we'll get a game 5 in Canada. I'm going to go the Yankees for something a little bit different, just because I do think I've seen teams take that few days off and it not be beneficial. So probably the first, I think, of the 4 series that we covered earlier in the week and now this one that I've gone the underdog team like this to take it. I guess maybe Padres probably technically counted. This is definitely going to be a bit more of a notable upset, but I think the Yankees can get it done.
So Yankees, Spoon's pick in the first of 4 division series over Toronto. Let's go to the West Coast. We'll stay in the American League. The 2 versus the 6 in the American League Division Series. The Tigers taking on Seattle. The first 2 games of that series will be in Seattle. Neither team in this one has elected to name a starting pitcher either, which is annoying when you're trying to preview the first game of a division series. Detroit obviously going 3 games in Cleveland. Tarek Skubal getting the win in game 1, and then sort of an early onslaught of runs today in their eventual win against Cleveland. Actually, they got 4 runs in the 7th inning. Dingler going deep. It'll be interesting to see how they use Skubal here, because it's 4 days rest. He's one of those guys that's obviously still young, potentially could take the baseball. It was a 2-1 win for him in that game against the Guardians, game number 1. Just looking how many pitches Skubal threw. I mean, he threw 107, so it's unlikely that he probably would throw game 1. I guess the only reason why maybe you would consider it is because in a 5-game series with a day off, you potentially could throw him in game 1 to 5. But this is probably one where Detroit, playing a homer-happy team, are just going to have to be happy with, not being able to throw Skubal in 2 games of a series. They're going to have to win it with him only throwing 1 game, I would have thought.
Yeah, I don't know who else they can really go game 1, to be honest. Like, just looking at it, I think there's a chance they're going to effectively be going a bullpen game. Their starting rotation, there's only 3 guys that have made more than 20 or more than 15 starts this year. It's Casey Mize, Jack Flaherty, and Skubal. All 3 guys just pitched in this series, just gone against Cleveland. So the rest is just a mismatch of sort of failed experiments like Chris Paddock and Charlie Morton and these sort of reclamation projects that didn't really work. I'm not super familiar with Detroit Tigers baseball, but I think it could be a bullpen game, and it could just be 4 or 5 guys stitched together, because even looking at innings pitched, like, you had Skubal this year with 195, Flaherty 161, Casey Mize with 149. No one else had more than 90. Like, they've been sort of mismatching SP4 and SP5 all year. And that's why I did like him in a best of 3 and in a best of 5. But it's really important that they do potentially all back up with 1 less day rest, I think, because otherwise, yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what they do. And if they are going a bullpen game against Logan Gilbert, all of a sudden they're just, they're playing with a massive sort of handicap there, I think. So, yeah, I'm not sure if there's sort of speculation or anything out there as far as that. But, yeah, I don't love the potential of them going with a bullpen game if that's what they are going to do.
And if you're taking the Yankees on momentum against Toronto, it would be difficult to not take Seattle on momentum against Detroit. We would potentially play 3 of 5 games in Seattle. You talk about Seattle being able to line up their pitching staff. Detroit potentially will go with a bullpen game. The problem with trusting the Seattle Mariners is what every Seattle sports fan will tell you. I mean, this is a team that is notorious for getting a fan base riled up, particularly when they have a decent team, and either going out in 1 or out in the championship series, right? It's just historically that's what's happened with this Seattle franchise. And from the people that I'm speaking to in the Seattle area, there is still this guarded bit of optimism. They feel as though they need to win a playoff series before they even allow themselves to believe. Winning the division was a big thing for them, right? Cal Raleigh having his season, putting up cartoon numbers, has added to the hype of the Seattle Mariners. And it almost does feel like they're this darling team. We'll get to the Brewers. I feel like they're sort of that same way in the National League. But the momentum of the Mariners, is that enough, do you feel like, to carry this team through, finally get that proverbial monkey off their back? Look, they've won playoff series in the last 20 years, but it just always seemed to be that team that has a little bit of hype around them when they get to the playoffs, because typically when they do get to the playoffs, they're a very good team. They hardly ever limp in, and this is a good Seattle team. But from what I'm hearing from people out of the Pacific Northwest, they are approaching this postseason with guarded optimism.
Yeah, so just closing out that last point, it looks like the last 3 or 4 times after Casey Mize has pitched has been Kaida Montero for the Tigers. So they're probably going to go that path, but it looks like he just kind of goes 4 innings. And and maybe as someone they're still stretching out because he started 12 games of 20 appearances this year. So he might be sort of being converted into that longer guy, and then they will go bullpen. I don't like that at all for Detroit, to be honest. I really like Seattle having the momentum they had and then having the break. I think it's very different to the Jays where, okay, you think we just limped in and then we go and watch the team that nearly run us down continue to play really good baseball. From Seattle's point of view, it's kind of like you got to watch. I guess, I did say on the show earlier this week that look out for Detroit if they win, because it means they've kind of exercised those demons of the historic division choke, and they're potentially right where they want to be. I think, though, that the argument for that with them was like Scooble's going to be going game one. If that's not the case, if they're the mismatch of Logan Gilbert against a pretty untested 24-year-old rookie for Detroit, I think is huge. The counter to that then is that you probably get Scooble back for game two and he's going against, like the SP2 for Seattle, and maybe they steal that one game on the road. So it does, like, the lineup can get quite interesting as far as matchups and that sort of thing. But I mean, I've been big on Seattle since the trade deadline, obviously going and getting those guys from Arizona. I still think they've got the best bullpen in baseball. I know the stats say that it's the Padres, but that looks at like everyone who comes out of there. If we're talking playoff baseball, we're talking about 3 or 4 guys typically. And for Seattle, that's like Brash, Munoz. And it's just, I think a bullpen that is terrifying. And what did they win in their last 20? Like 17 of the last 20 or something like that. That's a team that I'm pretty excited about. I think, it's going to be quite interesting what Cal Raleigh can do in the postseason. I'm excited to see how that storyline continues. Obviously, that doesn't impact MVP voting. But for many years, Aaron Judge has been the default AL MVP and then sort of fallen short for his team in the playoffs. Not that it will change voting, and I know that that's separate with postseason, but what the narrative would be for Cal Raleigh if he just continues to do it, right? Like if he just hits like 3 or 4 bombs in this division series, 3 or 4 in the championship series, it's going to be like, wow, okay, we're going to look at him in a very different light as opposed to a guy who was just, not saying with any disrespect, but he got to play in Oakland a lot this year and, hit his fair share of bombs out, Sacramento a lot this year and hit his fair share out of a minor league park. I'm excited to see what Josh Naylor and the likes of Gino Suarez can do. I'm excited to see Randy, who just turns into a different, player in the postseason and has done that in the past. J-Rod obviously had an unbelievable year too. I do think Seattle win this one in 3 or 4 games, with the one potentially that Detroit take being game 2 with the Scooble on the bump.
And, I mean, what a fascinating matchup it could be if Seattle and New York are playing each other for an American League Championship Series, right? Because you can get Raleigh and Judge going head-to-head, the two obvious. And, I think that AL MVP voting is going to be a lot closer than maybe what people think. But, God, that would be fun if those two are going head-to-head for a 7-game series, Seattle and New York, sort of cross-country.
Yeah. I mean, what's the game
one
2
thing
potentially? Sorry, you go. I was just saying game 2 potentially then might be Brian Wu versus Tarek Skubal, which is still like no cakewalk for Detroit. And then Luis Castillo, who kind of had a pretty down year by his standards, but against Jack Flaherty. Like, even with the staggered day, Seattle probably have the pitching edge almost the whole way through, with the exception of Scooble versus Brian Wu, but at home in Seattle where splits favor both guys. Yeah, I'm sort of talking myself into it. I also wouldn't be surprised if Seattle swept.
Well, this series is interesting as well because the schedule has this much more spread out. And the only reason why I bring this up is because those extra days for arms is crazy important, right? So the two teams will play Saturday, Sunday in the U.S. They would then play game 3 before having a potential off day and then play games 4 and 5. So there's a potential even, if A.J. Hinch has that in the back of his mind, that Scooble's the type of guy that could come out of the bullpen if he has to in game 5. Because if he does pitch game 2 and say he goes 6 innings, Detroit is out in front. Do you have that early hook and say, look, we're going to pull you because on 3 days rest, we may have to use you out of the bullpen? These are the things that make playoff series fascinating, right? Because that would never happen in a 162-game regular season, but very well could happen because the way the schedule sort of shakes up. for Seattle and Detroit. And I'm with you. Look, I would love to see the Seattle Mariners go through to an American League Championship Series. And Eric, if you are listening, cover your ears. If they are to play the Yankees, that mouthwatering matchup between Cal Raleigh and Aaron Judge playing for a chance at the World Series, I think would be box office television. Look, let's move on to the National League. We will start with a 2v3 matchup, the Phillies versus the Dodgers, and hallelujah, the only game of the 4 on Sunday that has a pitching matchup, and it's a good one. By virtue of the Dodgers winning that wild card series in consecutive games, meaning that they didn't have to throw Shohei Ohtani in game number 3. That was their initial plan, that if it did get to a third game against the Reds, that they were going to throw Ohtani. So they get to rest him. He goes in game 1 against Christopher Sanchez in Philadelphia. This is a fantastic game of baseball to start what should be a really good series.
Yeah, and I mean, like, he's ready now, right? Like, his last start, Ohtani, had 91 pitches. Like, he is fully stretched out. They went super patient with him. Like, he was 20 pitches, 30 pitches. Like, the longest you'll see a guy get stretched out. Like, it took him 14 starts to get to 90 pitches, and he did it literally in the nick of time last start of the season against Arizona as he struck out 8. So yeah, we're actually getting it to the real sort of level, as opposed to him being, like a fancy opener or whatever. And I think that does make for a very mouth-watering sort of matchup if you're able to put aside different varying dislikes for the teams and their sort of payrolls. But on paper, it's going to be unbelievable because, yeah, like, look, Sanchez probably had the most underrated season of any player in baseball this year. Like, I don't think he was talked about enough I know Skeens dominated, the conversation around the Cy Young in the National League, and it was actually Sanchez's teammate who was the main danger all year to Skeens for that award in Wheeler before he went down. But it just, like, looking at it, I know pitcher WAR is like a funky kind of stat, and you don't know how much sort of magic they pour into that. But I mean, he was just unbelievable this year from a WAR perspective. He had 8 WAR, a 2.5 ERA, a positive strikeout rate. Like, I don't think enough was sort of said about him, and maybe it is because he was technically behind Zach Wheeler as like an SP2, but he was there in name only and not in stats. So I'm really excited for this series. I'm excited for it, I guess, as well, because I don't have a team that I like, so I just have to sit and watch the baseball, right? Like, there's no heart factor here for me. It's all head. I get to watch 2 teams that objectively were 2 of the best teams in baseball all year. And they do shape up really well for a series here. I'm trying to think if they've met recently in the playoffs. I don't think they have. I'm thinking the last few NLCSs, it sort of hasn't been that, because the Braves were there a few times, the D-backs were there once. It seems like they kind of continued to have a year where they'd miss each other. So this will be huge. This is like a Cowboys versus whoever sort of matchup, Cowboys versus Eagles kind of matchup for the MLB, and a chance for them to really promote some of the biggest stars in the game.
Yeah, it really does feel like a de facto NLCS caliber matchup in the division series. Just on Sanchez, I mean, you're right. He had an incredible season. His best month of the year was September. I mean, he came home with a wet sail in 32 2/3 innings, 5 starts in September. He had a .65 earned run average with 31 strikeouts. So a season in which he had over 200 and, had an ERA hovering around a .50 in his last 5 starts in September. That's a dangerous guy for the Dodgers to be facing on the road in game 1 of this series. It sounds absurd to say this, and tell me if I'm absurd. And I don't know if you can hear that, but the neighbor's dog already thinks that it's absurd. As soon as I said that, it started barking. Are the Phillies a more complete baseball team than the Dodgers are? I think the Dodgers' star factor sometimes makes us feel like they're the best team in baseball. But is this Phillies team maybe a better roster, top to bottom, than what the Dodgers are? Is that an absurd question to ask?
I would say yes, and I would say it because of one player in particular, and it was a player that they went and paid a fair bit for at the deadline, and that would be their star closer, Joan Duran. Like, having that guy that locks down the 9th inning for them and preserves a lead with an incredible sort of consistency is something the Dodgers are sorely missing. And that bullpen has just limped its way through. I mean, even that Red series, they were just leaking runs late. And I know it wasn't necessarily a super high leverage situation in a couple of those games by the time they were leaking those runs. But even at the end of the regular season, the Dodgers back end of that bullpen was just sort of nothing convincing at all. Like, you've got Duran, who was just saving almost every single time he had an opportunity. He's got a near 12 strikeout rate. Like that, I think, if you're talking about all phases of baseball, kind of does say yes to your question. And I'd also argue that I know they don't have Zach Wheeler now, but you could almost make a case for the rotation being better too, despite the Dodgers spending so much money. They've had to rejig guys. A lot of them have been injured this year, and they haven't got sort of consistent outings out of them. But like Luzardo made 32 starts and was lights out for a lot of the year. Ranger Suarez made 26 starts, was right there. So if we're kind of talking about, like a best of 5, I think it does favor the Phillies a little bit, whereas a best of 7 would probably favor the Dodgers more. So if I'm a Phillies fan, I'm happy we're meeting them now, because it gives our top guys like Sanchez and Luzardo probably a chance to go 2 times each. Did you say there was 1 off day or 2 off days?
This series has 2 off days. So oddly enough, they have an off day following game 1. Games 2, 3, and 4 would be consecutively. So they would actually play in Philadelphia on Monday and then play on Tuesday night in Los Angeles, then play the game 4 the following day before an off day, and then a potential game 5 that would happen next Friday. So this is a series that has 2 off days, which it's kind of funny, the scheduling. Look, we talked about the fact that Yankees and Toronto series will not have an off day. They'll play on 5 consecutive days, whereas this one potentially could be 5 games played over 7 days. And look, it makes sense because they're at opposite ends of the country. But it is interesting. And like I said, it would change the way a manager would approach a series, knowing that you have those potential off days if the series do get late.
Yeah, so Sanchez has made 14 appearances this year with 4 days rest. So I'm just trying to map that out. Would that bring him back game 4 or game 5? Game 4.
He would be available game 5 because
game 5, yeah, okay.
The off day happens on game 2. Well, and if he came back on 4 days rest, they wouldn't play that day. So. But look, he could still pitch twice in the series, and I think that's a massive plus potentially for Philadelphia.
Yeah, whereas I'm not sure the Dodgers are doing that with Ohtani. Like they'd be, I'll have to check, but there's no way he pitched on 4 days rest this year. I wouldn't have thought, given how, no. He made 2 starts on 5 days rest and 12 starts on 6 days rest. So we're talking ace versus ace. Sanchez able to go twice, I think it's a massive factor for Philly, whereas in a best of 7, you'd see Ohtani twice. Plus the 3 home games instead of, the sort of, I'm leaning towards Philly in this series. It's going to come down to who has those moments, right? Like with the bat, it's going to be Bryce Harper. We know what sort of Schwarber can do in the postseason. Guys like Castellanos and that have been around the mark as well. I think Alec Boehm, is he on the IL? I think they might be down 1 or 2 of their best, but it's a lineup that I think is quite, like, it's got the reputation, it's got the prestige, like the whole way through, and that doesn't always win you baseball games. But Trey Turner's been there and done it. Like JT Realmuto's been there and done it. The Dodgers getting sort of 7, 8, 9 guys being either rookies or guys that probably need to try and catch lightning in a bottle. I'm not sure how sustainable that's going to be in what is, and I know this from watching the NLCS 2 years ago, I think maybe the best / most hostile environment in baseball is Philadelphia during a Phillies postseason game. Like the atmosphere there, I think, for a visiting player would be insanely sort of confronting. And at the same time, they seem to consistently throw their team over the line. When things are going well, we also all remember Alec Boehm sort of booting a couple of balls and getting booed like relentlessly, right? Like they can turn on their own quite quickly as well.
Philadelphia sports fans can do that in general, regardless of the sport.
Yeah, I mean, they're probably, extremely entitled, I think, as a sports fandom city. But I like their chances here in a best of 5, and I think those little things around just the way it's going to line up. If it was a best of 7, I'd probably say the Dodgers, because the best of 7 are, a team with more superpower should probably win. A best of 5, I think, where it's in Philly for 3 of the 5, they get the little pitching tweaks like Sanchez twice and not Ohtani twice. I'm talking myself into Philly in 5.
So Philly did win the season series. In fact, won both series. These 2 teams played each other in April and in September. So they saw each other when it means next to nothing back in April, and then played again in September. And Philly were the winners of that series. Look, I think you're right. I think having 3 games potentially at home, if the Dodgers had home field in this series? Would that sway you the other direction, do you think?
It would make it really close. You'd still have the factor of Sanchez going twice. I think you'd really need to figure out which game Philly are going to steal. You know, the old saying that the series doesn't start until the road team wins one. I'm not sure the Dodgers win a game in Philly, and that just might end up being the series, right? Like all 5 games are won by the home team, and that's sort of the end of that. Because if Phillies can create that environment where they just look unstoppable and, you know, their players sort of rise to the occasion on that, I think it's going to be tough for the Dodgers to steal one, especially with a bullpen that seems to keep collapsing consistently, as opposed to like when Duran coming out and he's got that epic entrance and it's like, okay, 9th inning, like, you know, 1, 2, 3 save is sort of there. It would maybe change things a little bit, but I think between the two of them, those factors there, I do like Philly to go on with.
I did see that Philadelphia had a inter-squad scrimmage last night that there were like 35,000 people there for at the bank. It was Baby Blues versus Pinstripes, and it was like it looked like a playoff atmosphere, and it was just the Phillies playing each other. So Spoon taking the Phillies. Sorry?
Yeah, sorry. One more thing I just wanted to talk about. I found it quite interesting yesterday that it was already like, 7-2. The Dodgers sent Yamamoto out for another partial inning and ran his pitch count up to 113. I thought that was quite surprising / unnecessary given they've got like 5 or 6 starters as it is, but they want Yamamoto to be that guy. He made 30 starts this year. He was the only one sort of consistently doing that. I'd be surprised if he pitched as high as 113 pitches in many starts all year. No, the most he had was 112 in a start against the Orioles. So to be probably unnecessarily pushing him that far in a game that was, you know, clearly won, I think, at 7-2, whether that says where the confidence is at for the Dodgers in their bullpen, and maybe now the repercussions of that are going to be that he can't go as deep a second time around on, you know, 4 days rest in a game 2 of this series in Philadelphia. I think there might be some flow-on effects there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the other interesting thing is Dave Roberts electing to go with Shohei Ohtani in Game 1 against Christopher Sanchez instead of maybe getting a more favorable matchup, potentially where, you know, Ohtani could go 6 or 7 innings of shutout baseball. But as we talked about, the Philadelphia rotation is so tough that maybe it doesn't really matter who you throw Ohtani against. You're going to get a tough arm regardless. So I agree with you there. I think Philadelphia, believe they are the slight favorite in that series. You'd be able to tell me that, but I think that they should be, with the season that they've had, should be getting over the top.
Phillies at $2.05 underdog.
Interesting. A little bit of value there on the Phillies.
Yeah, and if you want to take him 3-2, you can get $4.80.
Really, really good value there. Look, let's move on to the last National League Division Series. Brewers versus Cubs, as talked about at the top, the second of 2 series that features divisional opponents. You get 2 divisional winners facing each other in 2 of these series and 2 divisional opponents facing each other in these series. Chicago, Milwaukee. The Cubs actually edged Milwaukee 7-6 in the season series. Not that that necessarily matters, but Wrigley Field, even as a Cardinal fan, Wrigley Field in October is unbelievable. And it was kind of a bummer that all of those games were sort of day games. And in a way, it was cool because it was very Wrigley, that they were sort of day games that kind of edged into the evening. But we will get to see, hopefully at some point in this series, a little bit of evening baseball, although as I look at it now, a lot of these are still scheduled for sort of early day games. But I take you back to a comment that you made maybe 4 months ago. And this is why you got to be careful, Spoon, because I don't forget things. We were talking about Craig Counsell and the way that he manages a baseball team. And the question was he a system guy? Could he do it somewhere that wasn't Milwaukee? And it's so interesting that these 2 teams are matched up because it is kind of a Counsell Bowl, right? Craig Counsell facing his old team, the number 1 seed, or the number 1 seed in the Brewers, having to face them potentially 3 times at that ballpark. Does his knowledge of Milwaukee's tendencies come into play a little bit here? And does he maybe come in going, and again, I'm putting this on you. I'm putting 100% of this on you, but it's not you. There's a lot of people that have asked the same question: can Craig Counsell manage in a place that's not Milwaukee? This is interesting to me for a lot of reasons. Your thoughts? Yeah,
well, I mean, I guess the edging out the season series is a factor there, right? Like if we're going to look at statistically, I think definitely. And I also think, you know, the Brewers starters here are going to be guys that he knows, especially like Freddie Peralta is listed as the game 1 starter. Cubs haven't named theirs. We were kind of speculating maybe maybe Boyd can go after 50 pitches or whatever it was in his game one. I think he'll know little bits and pieces. Whether that's enough is going to be sort of my question. I feel like the Brewers are a team that could have won 100 games or more if they didn't sort of take the foot off the gas later in the season. It felt like they had the division clinched, then they had top seed clinched, and I'm not sure, whereas like the Jays were genuinely trying to win games down the stretch and failing to do so, I'm not sure how much intensity there was for the Brewers. So I feel like the Brewers are the better team as a well-rounded team compared to the Cubs. And I say that with already kind of a little bit of egg on my face because I didn't think that the Cubs were going to beat the Padres. So they kind of outperformed there. And they really did so with probably a number of guys I wasn't expecting to be contributing factors. Like I think Carson Kelly had some pretty big moments. PCA kind of broke out of his slump today with a big hit. But they also just had a really good showing from a bullpen that I was really keen to take on from a betting point of view because they hadn't been great since the All-Star break. They all came out and kind of shoved, and they needed to in a couple of those games where the starters didn't go too deep. Like we spoke about Boyd in game one. I think he went 4.1. Shota didn't go particularly deep yesterday. He went, they opened into Shota. That's interesting. They went Kitteridge into Shota, but he only went 4 innings. So there was still another 4 to find there from the bullpen. And today Tyone went 4 innings. So they needed another 5 from the bullpen. Like these were guys that was the big knock on the Cubs was like, is there going to be enough bullpen depth there and quality? And they were able to keep a Padres lineup that I was really fond of, and it's quite a deep lineup. They managed to keep them quiet, and the Padres honestly kind of went down without a whimper in a couple of those games. We spoke a bit about it in game one. Today was quite similar. There'd be a couple of guys on base here and there, but it never felt like the big swing was coming. Tatis had a horrendous series. Just, we're not talking about the Padres anymore because they went and got eliminated, but how much of that do you attribute to him struggling, or how much of that is it fair play? The Cubs pitching was better than expected. And if the bullpen can match what they did in this Padres series, I do give them a chance against the Brewers side that I think on paper are the much better team.
Yeah, just on Chicago's bullpen, like the way that Craig Counsell was able to navigate game one, as you talked about Boyd just going that 4 1/3 innings, but I think the 4 out of the bullpen did not allow a base runner. After they pulled the starter in game one, that was Palencia, Pomeranz, Kitteridge, and then ended up with Keller, who got the save in the 9th inning. But it's so funny because that Cubs bullpen, they had a decent September, and some of the metrics will tell you that they've been an okay bullpen, that they've been, in the top half of baseball, but they haven't necessarily been one of the best. And I mean, we thought, the bullpen advantage was obviously going to be with the Padres. It is disappointing we won't get to see Mason Miller pitch again in the postseason just quietly because that guy is electric television. But Counsell having the faith to pull Boyd after 4 1/3 and then that bullpen doing what they did, for me, that not only set the tone for the series, because as you talk about, game 3 was kind of a mirror of game 1 in that wildcard series, but it's also kind of a warning shot to Milwaukee to go, look, if we get 4 innings out of a starting pitcher, and again, a starting rotation that's been much maligned, Cade Horton's not there, so we won't necessarily get to see him in the postseason. If Boyd goes game 1 of the division series, who knows? But it's kind of a warning shot to Milwaukee to say, I'm not afraid to pull a guy in the 4th inning or the 5th inning if I have to, because I feel like I can trust these guys in the back end of the bullpen.
I'm wondering how that plays out over a 5-game series now, because to catch Lightning twice there, it was a incredible job by these guys, and they did it over 3 games. I can't think of any of the other matchups in the other 4 series for 8 teams where the starter went so short. I mean, we saw like Crochet go like 8 innings, right? And that gave Boston their best possible chance. They still lost. So the Cubs did an awesome job to bounce back from a guy going 4.1, but the starting pitching and the rotation sort of matchup, I think, is a massive mismatch. Boyd is still, I guess, the ace of that staff. Like their best starting pitcher had 2.6 WAR this year. Freddie Peralta had a brilliant year. Brandon Woodruff has been ramping right back up since he came back from the IL. Mizorowski, obviously the rookie, sort of right there in Rookie of the Year voting this year and was named an All-Star. You'd have to see these Cubs probably stay at the same level or get better and the Brewers to potentially drop off from a pitching point of view, to feel like Chicago have the better of the pitching. But where I think Chicago can counter that is if the bats can wake up, I guess, is probably fair. Like a lot of these guys were struggling in the second half. We talked about PCA as a potential MVP guy halfway through the year at the All-Star break, and his second half was quite slow. Kyle Tucker was right around that MVP conversation as well. Hasn't had a huge second half of the season. If a couple of these guys just do what we know they can do, the script will flip towards the Cubs in a hurry. But what I like about the Brewers, and it probably reminds me of like the Tigers as far as their offense is there might be like one or two guys that are considered the star of the team, but it's a very, very well-rounded offense. Like none of their hitters were all-stars this year. Bryce Durang's got 5.5 WAR, but it's almost then just consistently like guys who have just contributed at different times, like Contreras, Yelich, Jackson Churio, Rhys Hoskins has had his moments. Like it's a very deep lineup where they don't need one or two guys to come to the party to necessarily get it done, where that might be the case for the Cubs. So I think as I'm sort of taking all of that into account, I'm probably going Brewers in 4 games. I think the toll of that Padres series, as far as the arms that were used and the fact that would have to be repeated again to have a chance, is probably going to be a bit too much for the Cubs. But we'll see. There's if you look at the last 10 years, the team that beats the Brewers makes the World Series. So, and the Brewers continue to find a way to fall short. Like we talked about when we were talking about teams that we thought were a genuine World Series chance at the trade deadline. I said I can't take the Brewers seriously until they prove to me that they can make a World Series, because they have fallen apart in some massive moments, right? Like it was Pete Alonso's homer last year. I think it was Juan Soto like a few years ago against Devin Williams in the one-game wild card. They've fallen painfully short in series before when they've gotten to this point. So I guess it's, they need to earn a little bit of trust from probably their fans, but also from neutrals, because if it did get to a game 5, all of a sudden I'd be all over Chicago, I think, because the Brewers have just historically struggled in those big high leverage playoff moments.
Well, it's similar to what we talked about with Seattle as well, right? Like it's just so hard to be all in on Seattle. I know that you were at some point because the odds were pretty good to be all in on Seattle. And obviously a couple of those Diamondbacks guys heading to the Pacific Northwest at the trade deadline, but it still kind of feels the same with me with Seattle. You want to see them do it before you really get behind them and believe. And I think there's a large bit of the fan base in Milwaukee, just as there is in Seattle, going, we're cautiously optimistic. We think we have a team that can do it this year, but let's just see them win a division series first. Just quietly, is Major League Baseball panicking at the thought of a potential Milwaukee-Seattle World Series?
Yeah, and it's awesome. Or even like the Tigers getting in or something like that. Like they would not be happy, even looking at the NL matchups, that it's like, you're like, sure, Cubs are a bigger market team, but they wanted the Dodgers and the Phillies to be meeting in the NLCS, right? Like that's the big ticket item. They wanted 7 games of that. They wanted 2 Ohtani starts in an NLCS, and then you guarantee then that one of those teams is going to the World Series, whereas it kind of hasn't just worked out that way from a bracket point of view, and that's because the Brewers went and secured the best record in baseball this year and derailed those plans. I would love it, big time, and I think it's a genuine chance. But as you said, I'm much more in on Seattle's chances than I am on the Brewers, and I think the Brewers can get past the Cubs here, and then I think it's going to be a tough championship series against either the Dodgers or the Phillies, because whoever comes out of that is going to have played some good baseball to get there.
So just to recap Spoon's thoughts, he is taking the team with home field advantage in 3 of the 4 division series, Phillies and Milwaukee on the National League side, and Seattle and New York on the American League side. We'll obviously talk about it once it gets to the American League Championship Series, Spoon, but just a couple seconds, your thoughts. If it is Yankees Mariners in the ALCS, who are you taking in that?
Mariners. I'm still a believer that
still a believer.
Yeah, I love then a 4-man rotation for the Mariners of Brian Wu, Luis Castillo, Logan Gilbert, and George Kirby, as opposed to like the Yankees started a rookie as their 3rd guy today. I don't know who their 4th guy is going to be in a 7-game series, because they've had, they lost Cole for the season. Stroman's been out pretty much the whole year as well. So that 4th guy all of a sudden, I think, is where that's a game that Seattle should be winning, and then is Logan Gilbert as good as Max Fried? I'd say definitely. And, like if you're 50-50 on the others, but there's a clear mismatch on one of them, I like Seattle. And I also think it's just a deeper lineup that won't be relying as much on Cal Raleigh as the Yankees continue to sort of rely on Aaron Judge. But it's a matchup I hope we see. I know Eric could be devastated if we do see it. And in many ways, his absence here today has let me speak purely unfiltered. Whether that'll backfire or not, it usually does. We'll see.
Yeah, it's his fault. If he wants to defend himself, he's got to turn up, right?
Yeah, I've never missed an episode, and that's why.
Yeah, that's true. Are the championship series 2-3-2 format, or are they 2-2-1-1-1?
2-3-2. They changed it. But I know. Ask me how I know. I know because I saw game 3, 4, and 5 losses for Arizona in Arizona.
That's right. Sorry. You would think that I knew the answer to that question, and I just wanted to bring up old wounds. So You're taking Seattle in a potential ALCS matchup against New York to be the American League representative in the World Series. Milwaukee, Philadelphia. Who you got?
I think Philly, for the same reason. I think if you're getting past the Dodgers, you're probably getting past the Brewers. And I think, okay, then all of a sudden it's now 2 starts for Sanchez, 2 starts for Luzardo. That looks for me a much better matchup than, say, 2 starts for Freddie Peralta, but then 2 starts for Brandon Woodruff that's kind of been good, but ramping back up. He hasn't pitched more than 85 pitches. So what does 2 starts for him look like in a best of 7? What does 2 starts for maybe a rookie like Mizorowski look like in a best of 7? I don't know. I'd be much more comfortable being the Phillies with Sanchez, Luzardo, and Walker or something like that. I'll take Philly in that matchup.
As is the theme in playoff baseball, pitching is king. Well, the fact that there's more playoff baseball coming this weekend means that there is money to be made. We're going to take a quick break, and on the other side, even though it's still early, but there are some markets, Spoon's going to give some of his best plays for the division series. Stick with us. Division Series game still a couple of days away, but that doesn't mean that there's not a little bit of value to be found. Spoon has scoured some of the early markets and sees a few things that he likes. Spoon, what are we playing in some of the early games of the Division Series?
Yeah, so we can probably guess that I'll start with the AL series that I think is the more exciting one. It's obviously the Blue Jays and the Yankees. We spoke just before about it's interesting that Toronto haven't named a starter given they've had all this time. We know it's probably going to be Kevin Gausman. I'd be very surprised if it wasn't. Kevin Gausman had a great year this year, but he made 4 starts against the Yankees, and his ERA was just okay. It was a smidge under 4, but not brilliant by his standards. And his strikeout rate was just 7.1, which is well below where he was for the year. I really like a lineup now of left-handed bats that, we spoke before about how big a factor that's going to be when you've got Rice, Jazz, and a couple of the other guys in that lineup against a righty from the start of the game. They've all seen him now 4 times this year. There's going to be enough sort of tape there. I'm thinking you're going to get 3.5 as the run total, potentially with plus money, for the Yankees to continue the momentum of, they scored a 4-run inning today against Boston. That was all they needed. They're playing a bit more team baseball than we're used to seeing from a New York Yankees side, and it's not relying on Aaron Judge to hit 2 solo homers or Stanton to do the same. They're actually building innings for the first time in a while and staying out of like brain dead base running mistakes or grounding into double plays, which is something they used to do a lot of. This is a Yankees lineup that is quite deep, and it's much deeper when the lefties are in the lineup. It's Gausman in a matchup where he's not as strong as he has been against other teams, and they've seen him a lot this year. So I'm looking to take Yankees over 3.5 team total because my expectation is that's what it'll be, and you might be getting $2.10 about it. Moving on into the other American League series, this one's going to be a little trickier to navigate because they haven't named the starter. I think we know who it is, but we're probably going to have to wait to see what the lines are. I'm really keen to see what Logan Gilbert can do, who, everything I say here will be irrelevant if it's not Logan Gilbert in game 1, but I'd be surprised if it isn't, given the way that their rotation's kind of been stacking up recently. And look, the same that I'm about to say could still apply to a game 2 start if he doesn't start game 1. We know he's going to be starting one of the 2 games at home against the Tigers, and this is a team I'm really excited about. So Logan Gilbert at home this year had a 2.24 ERA and a 13.3 strikeout rate, which is phenomenal. His road stats nowhere near as good, to the point where he was actually quite bad with a 4.74 ERA and a whip over 1.3. But given the way that these matchups work, we know the Mariners have the first two games at home, and Logan Gilbert's going to be taking one of the first two starts. I'm really excited to play his strikeout props. And he did manage, he saw the Tigers twice this year, and he struck out 19 in 10 innings. So that is some pretty staggering kind of stuff. A 16.5 K rate, if you don't mind, better than any other team he saw this year.
Decent.
Yeah, regardless of the sample size. And the Tigers are happy to go up there hacking, man. Like they don't really care. They were a bottom strikeout rate team all year, a team we sort of took on consistently with these player props. But yeah, look, two starts against the Tigers for a 2.6 ERA, 19 strikeouts in 10 innings pitched. What you do see in the postseason a lot is the lines are a little bit less than they should be, because they price in the short leash that everyone is on. And we saw that already in the last 3 days, guys getting hooked ridiculously early. I mean, I think Darvish went one inning today. Yeah, he went one inning through 21 pitches, and they'd seen enough and moved on. So you will see lines that are one or two lower than where they probably should be. So I'm really keen, whichever start it is, but I am hoping it's game one, because it means it won't be against Scooble. I think you're going to be able to get Logan Gilbert 7 strikeouts and the Mariners to win at $2.50 to $2.70, very similar to what we took with Crochet and the Red Sox win in game one against the Yankees. And I think that's unreal value for a guy who, like Crochet had done all year against the Yankees. Logan Gilbert's done it twice against the Tigers. We know there's probably a really good chance it's a favorable pitching matchup. If he's the game one starter, he's going against a mismatchy kind of bullpen game against the Tigers rookie. I'll take 7 in the win at that $2.50 mark, and I think that's going to be a really nice piece of value. Moving on into the National League, these are just a couple of straight strikeout plays, and we do have the lines out for them, which is great because some of these teams have been kind enough to share with us their thoughts as far as starting pitching. This goes against my prediction for the way this series will go as far as results. But on the Philly-Dodgers series, and I just spoke before about how I think the home team might win all 5 games, I do want to add that by that token, I am going to be having a little bit on Phillies to win that series. It's $2.05 on sports, but that usually means you can get up to $2.20 elsewhere. So a little bit of shopping around. I think if I'm getting $2.20 about a team that's going to have 3 home games and finish with a better record on the year is great value. But it won't be the play I'll talk you into for game one. I really like Ohtani's strikeout line over 6.5 at $2.11. The fact that he is now fully stretched out for the first time in his Dodgers career, basically, is really exciting to me. And I think as much as I was knocking Dave Roberts for sending Yamamoto out for an extra inning that he didn't need to do when the game was secured, and he ended up with 113 pitches, that gives me confidence from a strikeout point of view on a Dodgers starter, because I had a mate who needed 9 strikeouts from Yamamoto yesterday, and he thought he was cooked after the 6th. He goes back out there in the 7th inning. So little things like that make me think, okay, this Ohtani line at 6.5, they're thinking he's probably not going more than five and a bit innings, but he potentially could be, because he went 6 against Arizona with 90-something pitches in his last start of the season. The Dodgers are happy to send their starters out for as long as needed, even when the game might be sort of out of reach for either team. And also, if you look at back, even when Ohtani was pitching for the Angels, he seemed to always elevate when he was ace versus ace. When the pitching matchup was there and the stakes were there, he would deliver. So for him to be going in on the road against a guy like Sanchez, who has been phenomenal all year, I think he's going to be able to match him. The Phillies were a pretty solid strikeout rate team this year. Guys like Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber have no issue chasing if they think they're going to. They're sitting fastball, they get the sweeper, and they chase in the dirt. So I'm pretty happy with the over 6.5 at plus money for Ohtani. And I do think that price will probably shorten as we get a little bit closer to game one. And then the final series is the other National League series. So game one, we know we're getting fastball Freddie for the Brewers. We don't know for the Cubs. We're speculating maybe Boyd, but I'm happy to isolate and ignore that part of the matchup. Again, I really like a strikeout line of 6.5 for Freddie Peralta. He's been the consistent ace of this staff all year, a 2.7 ERA, strikeout rate of 10.4, and a Cubs team that even in the 3 games we just saw, probably with the exception of the Darvish start because he was just getting hit around, and that was always the danger for the Padres was SP3 and beyond, and that sort of ended up being Darvish, and he struggled. I mean, Cease was mowing guys down. He just got a very early hook yesterday, but I think he still picked up 6 strikeouts in like 4 innings. And the day before that, he had Pivetta pick up 9 strikeouts, even while allowing a couple of runs. Like this Cubs team will swing and miss. They're chasing the long ball a fair bit. Guys like PCA and even Tucker, they're a chance to go 1 for 4 with a home run, but they're striking out a fair bit too. The stats again, Freddie Peralta at home, just phenomenal. A 1.77 ERA and a strikeout rate of 10.6, notably better than his road stats. We know he's going to be at home for game 1. So give me over 6.5 strikeouts for Freddie Peralta, $1.99. I think he's going to be ready to go. And I think the Brewers have a bit more left in the tank.
It's an interesting point that you make about the early hook and pitcher strikeout lines. Maybe they're a K and a half less than what you would see in the regular season. It's interesting to see if the books kind of go too much that direction with that, because you can understand a quick hook in game 1 of a wild card series when it's best of 3, but I don't expect that hook would be as quick in game 1 of a division series when it's best of 5. So it's interesting that if the books do kind of go hard that direction to say, oh, we've seen a bunch of quick hooks, so we're going to make it a strikeout or a strikeout and a half less than what it would be. Not that you're going to have regular season levels of let's just leave the guy out there and let him figure it out because it's still a playoff game. But I do think that managers would tend to have not as quick a hook in game 1 of a 5-game series as what they would have in a 3-game series, obviously.
Yeah, I think a little factor there will be the road versus away. I think if you're on the road, it's you might want to be trying to not let things get out of hand a bit more because you've got the crowd against you, right? Like if you're pitching in Philly, for example, all of a sudden he just can't throw a strike and the crowd is just riding the guy. I think it's a bit different. Whereas if you're the home team and it's like all he has to do is throw 1 strike and all of a sudden he's the hero again. So we might see little factors there. And I think a lot of the early hooks that happened in this series, it was the guy on the road. Like Brian Bayer got hooked really early yesterday for Boston on the road. Yu Darvish got hooked really early today against the Cubs on the road. So I think there's a little bit of that there. I think it also does come down to who does the manager trust and who does he not. And sometimes that's like, okay, look, I thought Boston were great leaving the rookie out there today to kind of figure it out because, look, it ended up kind of biting him, but that was sort of some sloppy defense and a few mistakes as well. The Yankees probably never had that situation because he was so good, so they didn't really have any like big decisions to make as far as hooks there. It's really when we find out, like, we think, well, I personally think so much managing now is done by analytics and spreadsheets and all that kind of stuff. The gut feel of, is my guy going to get out of this, is like the last frontier for managerial decisions, I feel. And just as much as you can be a genius for when it works, you can be Kevin Cash pulling Blake Snell and losing a World Series. And that is like your defining moment as a manager making a decision. So they're where the stakes are super high, and they're where, we've seen a few times Aaron Boone will go out there and a guy will talk him out of taking him out of the game. And then I like, they're my favorite moments. I think Cole's done it a couple of times. He goes and finishes the game, and it's like, this is what baseball is all about. I won't be surprised if we see a couple of those kind of scenarios, even if it's like Ohtani, pitching game 1, because he can look like he's losing it, and they're obviously going to have the Tommy John concern. But if he kind of says, no, don't worry, it's all good. I was just, really fishing outside. I've still got my command. We'll see what that looks like.
Well, don't say we never did anything for you. 4 plays for the first games of the division series. All of those start Sunday, Australia time, Saturday in the United States. Spoon, just run through those quickly again for the good people.
Okay, so we'll start with the 2 National League ones, the prices we know. Freddie Peralta over 6.5 strikeouts, $1.99. And in the other National League series for game 1, I like Ohtani for over 6.5 strikeouts at $2.11. The other 2 in the American League, I'll crystal ball pricing a little bit, but I think you're going to get about $2 to $2.10 for Yankees over 3.5 team total in game 1 against Kevin Gausman. That's the prediction. And then in the series with the Tigers and the Mariners, I think you're going to be able to get around $2.50 for Logan Gilbert, 7 strikeouts, and the Mariners to win in game 1. And I'd still take it in game 2, but you would get a much better price because it would be against Scooble. So $2.50 is what I'm expecting for game 1.
And Spoon's a bit bashful. He's not going to do his own gloating, so I'll do it for him. If you joined us for the wildcard preview, Spoon nailed 3 of his 4 on opening day of the wildcard. So if I was you, I'd be following the great man in on day one of the division series. Look, it'll be a great weekend of baseball, a good weekend of sport if you're in Australia, but certainly a good weekend of baseball for those in North America. And if you hear a loud scream coming from the direction of Sydney, Australia, on Saturday Australian time, just know that Cheeky is probably appearing at the top of the front stretch, and Spoon, who will be in attendance at Royal Randwick, is trying to cheer home. Spoon, good luck on the weekend with Cheeky, and good luck with your plays in the division series.
Thank you, my friend.